Welcome! Welcome to our panel talking about community management and more closely, how to look after your MVPs, your most vulnerable players. Now, Gaming Live is presented by Healthysexual from Gilead Sciences, and the Community Zone is sponsored by Remag, a new place to connect with gamers in your community. Thank you to both of them for the support in making this happen. Are you an aspiring content creator, a junior social media manager, or maybe even a game master wanting to make your table safe and welcoming to all adventurers? Well, you're in luck because we're going to provide you with a toolkit, some tried and tested strategies on how to do that. With that being said, we all have backgrounds in different areas, from indie publishing to tabletop gaming and Twitch streaming. So I thought it would be best if everyone introduced themselves. I think we can start with Chi Chi.
Welcome in, everyone, and hello. My name is Chi Chi. You can find me on Twitch at Chi Chi or on any other social media at Chi Chi Streams. I'm a content creator and stream team manager.
Awesome. Em, do you want to pass on?
Okie dokie. Hi, I'm they, them. I'm a UK-based community manager on Redacted, previously on Sniper Elite, Zombie Army, and Evil Genius franchises. I'm a content creator raising awareness about neurodiversity and mental health.
Love that. Noir, you're next.
Hello, I'm Noir, he, they. I'm a founder of the Twitch channel Critical Misses. I'm a host for Gen Con TV, former community manager for Evil Genius Games, and former Twitch director for Niantic and the Pokemon Go Twitch channels, and some other stuff.
And some more stuff from Cole.
Hi, I'm Cole. I'm the founder of Red Jack Network, which boasts about 600 players at any one moment. It's super inclusive. I'm also the person behind Shaq's Motivation on Twitter. I also just founded Kernel Interactive, which is going to be for junior game devs. I've been working in game dev as a community manager and social media person for about 4 years now at a couple of indie studios.
Awesome. Well, and then there's me, a freelance community manager and content creator as well. And also, we're going to start off with one of the questions that I've asked all of us before this panel. We have bosses, right? We have things we want to do, especially as people that are coming from a marginalized background. And your boss agrees that you have tools that need to be there for safety. But we don't have time or a budget for that. So how do you convince them that they're not optional?
Who wants to go first?
I'll go.
Okay.
I appreciate that this question first. Well, first off, I appreciate that this question assumes that the bosses care about the safety. But I have had to, in my experience, pull up examples of people not taking the time to add those steps in to make sure that our books are accessible, safe, and responsible and ethical. And so I've shown examples of what happens when you skip those steps. And that sometimes works, but generally, sometimes you have to go a little bit harder and translate that into dollars, which is, bad press costs money. So you're actually saving money by doing these steps. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it's my job to always try.
Yeah,
I like that.
That's very true. Because if it just takes one bad interaction on Twitch, for instance, I was watching a Twitch streamer, and she was playing a really popular game, and she was getting a lot of flack in the comms just for being a woman, trying to be a professional esports player and everything in this game, and seeing not only just one clip, but it was a multitude of clips of how the community treated her in the in-game comms. I no longer want to play that game. Now take that impression and post it all across Twitter, Twitch, and then people talking about it just word of mouth. That's such a damaging aspect to the entire community, because you're going to have your good and you're going to have your bad, but it's the bad that stands out the most if it's there, which is why it needs to be shut down so quickly. And it's not worth the money from the bad players to alienate the good ones and then the possible players that pick up the game later on. So to have the safety measures in place and advocate for having the safe spaces and the hard lines, hard boundaries of this is how it has to be done, it's going to not only help your community grow, but they're going to realize that the studio cares about providing this space and providing a very healthy community. So not only will they help this game, but whatever you make afterwards, they know you're going to safeguard that space as well. So it's very important.
I was at a community management event just this week, and the general consensus there, because we had a conversation about the business case for ensuring that you were dealing with toxicity and generally safeguarding your community. The business case that was discussed was that if you don't deal with those things, you lose money. There was a direct correlation. Pretty much everybody in that auditorium agreed. So despite you shouldn't have to make a business case to look after people and look after their welfare, and we do have a responsibility because we are curating these spaces for gamers, but unfortunately I think certain people in the industry still need to hear the business case. But I think consistency and case studies are the things that you need in this situation. Consistency in that you need to keep on bringing it up. You need to communicate when you're at your limit if you're a community manager of one, and not just try and cope, because they need to know when you're over capacity. And then case studies, because you can see so many occasions where this has gone wrong, this hasn't been dealt with, and I'll just be echoing the things that have already been said. Don't let that happen. Don't let them put that on you when it happens either.
I do like that we all innately agree that's important. I mean, it might be partially because we happen to be those gamers, right? Those players that can be vulnerable if we enter a community. Like Cole said, I watch a stream and I feel like, okay, if you're acting like this, I don't think I'll be safe here either. Twitch has that little habit of itself as well. But sometimes that can also be scary. If you're the community manager for a brand that, for example, deals in sports games and you are acting or presenting as a woman, that can present you with extra challenges. So what do you think? Do those extra hurdles make it harder to actually do your job, or do you sometimes also feel like it empowers you, that you are the best person to make the case for those players because you are one of them?
I mean, I guess I'll go. I think because I'm a trans man, and when I was a woman, I was a Twitch streamer, and I was also a professional Halo player way back in the day, after the first release. And being in those spaces is incredibly difficult. It felt like I had to prove myself all the time. And now when I present as a man in these same spaces, suddenly I'm accepted. And knowing, I already knew there was a black and white difference, and then experience it, it's just so appalling to me that there's just a divide. So I am very open about being trans. I'm very open about being in, queer in these spaces, because I feel like if I have that beacon, now granted, I do get a lot of flack on Twitter. I'll get flack here and there, DMs, and it does bring a sense of unease. I don't feel like I'm safe all the time, but I know being that beacon, I'm allowing these other people who are not as vocal, who are not as presenting publicly, that they know that I'm going to protect those spaces. I'm going to advocate for them having their voice, having their opportunities, because I've seen both sides. I've seen everything, and knowing that struggle. So that's why I'm extremely vocal. Granted, it does have its issues, but I think it's very empowering overall.
I think this job is one in particular that requires empathy. Like if you don't have empathy, then this is not the gig for you. And I don't mean that offensively. I think empathy is a great thing. We should all have it, but I wish we all had it. But the thing is, it requires a lot of putting yourself in other people's situations. There are some people that will have genuine grievances with the brand that you represent, and then there are people that will just troll. And part of what the job is to separate the two. which can be a particularly exhausting and emotionally draining process. But because you represent a brand, you know, that's kind of what the job is. It's you don't want to ignore anybody that is calling out what your brand is doing and just label them a troll. You know, part of what we do is we have to listen, and we have to listen and to put ourselves in their shoes and to correct any changes that may be made, even if we can't ourselves initially see it. That's what I mean when I say it comes to empathy. Um, I have only ever worked in the TTRPG space, and unfortunately, uh, I don't receive a lot of the same pushback that my femme representing counterparts do. So I talk to a lot of them so that I can understand, you know, what our I was going to say clients. I just started a corporate job. Please forgive me. What our customers are going through. You know, and taking the time to figure out what you don't know. I think that's the most important part. Don't go in with the assumption that you have every angle of what your brand is doing figured out. You don't. There there are some things culturally that, you know, I had to learn on the fly and realize, oh, we're messing up big time. Like so, and and also when you find out that you're making a mistake that you didn't recognize, you also have to understand that you don't have the solution, because if you didn't see the problem, there's no way you can know how to fix it. So that involves reaching out. That involves uh, going to cultural consultants to get a better idea of understanding where we went wrong and understanding how to fix it. I talk too much. I'm sorry. I'll stop now.
Oh, no worries. I would have interrupted you. Don't worry about it. I am doing my job too. However, I do like how you separated like the brand and yourself. That being said, Chichi and like Em as well, as streamers that are in charge of their own brand, that sometimes is not a possibility. I cannot say, hey, this is my job. I'm clocking out. I'm going home. On your personal Twitter that you also use to advertise your streaming, you're gonna have fights. How do you handle that? Because they are attacking you as a person and not you as a brand.
I think for me, I do not take it as personal as what it might actually be from that person's end. Even though I am a content creator, and being a content creator means that my brand and my personality are very much like integrated with each other. I take it as people are attacking what they perceive of me. People are attacking what they know of me. And that is not something that I need to internalize for myself. As far as the question of feeling empowered, of course, I do manage my community and I have a stream team that I manage. I definitely feel empowered because I know that people see me in this space doing things that are scary, like calling out bigotry and calling for inclusivity, empowers others to do the same. So people who see me, they're like, oh, well, Chi-Chi's doing it. You know, this is a Black, queer, trans person who's entering spaces that are not made for Black, queer, and trans people, doing things that are super powerful, that are making big waves, making changes, and that empowers me to continue going.
I think for me, it's been a real balancing act. I'd like to be able to answer your question of, you know, being a queer marginalized person, do I feel empowered because of that experience? It would be nice to say yes. And in many ways it is, but also it's opened me up to other experiences that I wouldn't wish on anybody. And I think it's very much dependent on the audience and the game. I've worked with, I mean, at the moment, I've got a community of a very heavily disproportionate amount of neurodivergent people. And of course, being autistic, we see eye to eye on a lot of things. There's much less animosity in that space. There's a few comments here and there like, oh, well, that's not my experience. But in general, it's a very nice, wholesome space. But I've also worked with gamers who enjoy sort of military World War II shooter games, and it's a very different audience. And there are some really wholesome people within that audience, but there's also like a generational gap, quite a significant age gap, different culture, different backgrounds. A lot of them came from military backgrounds, and I don't want to generalize. I try and avoid doing this, but I also see trends. And the trend in general there was that there wasn't a lot of acceptance. And I think that because I feel a moral obligation to be visible for the people who relate to the same experiences that I have and, share similar elements of their identity, I want them to know that it's okay to be openly autistic and to be, visibly queer. But it also took away some of the power that I had in those spaces with that latter audience, with older people, because they didn't seem to have the same value for what I said because of my identity. And I think that's ridiculous. But also, I was empowered because I was the community manager in that space. So I was the admin in that space. I had a very airtight set of rules that I worked to. If people crossed the line and if people went for those personal attacks, I still held the power. So even though I didn't feel empowered, I felt the opposite of empowered in sharing my identity with those people who frankly didn't deserve to see who I was. I still held the power of my role, which, took a little bit of that back and gave me validation. I'm the person in that space that gets to deal with getting rid of people that aren't respectful of other people's identities. So yeah, it's a little bit of a mixed bag for me, but in general, I think we can do so much more good by being there and by being visible in gaming spaces. So I take the bad with the good.
Definitely. And like we've talked about it before when we practiced for this panel, but also like I think we've all had those conversations at conventions that sometimes the community of community managers can be very helpful. Moments like these where we can share those experiences and where we can like help each other with problems that we might not know an answer to. One of those is older and pre-existing communities. Like you kind of already went into that, but communities that you come into as a new person. It might be the company, it might just be you as a community manager needing to learn. But there is resistance, right? If we introduce them to, and I have to quote this, new things like pronouns and pronoun tags. How do you deal with that resistance? Do you have any strategies you can share with people experiencing the same problem?
I never know who wants to go.
I don't want to call anyone out. I just want to see
that's fair.
who feels comfortable.
It's a really tricky thing. I think it's very dependent on the demographic that you're talking with. I think some people who generally won't know about certain things but are still open-minded to learn, and then you'll have the people who are just like solid, why the hell is this part of my gaming experience? And I think there isn't a simple answer to this, but it comes down to consistency again, and having that really airtight player code of conduct. This is what we expect of you. If you cross this line, if it goes anywhere near mocking other people for using something that ultimately, like, you can't force someone into using pronoun tags on Discord, for example. They have to opt into that. It is their choice. We have to respect that they may or may not want to. But what you can insist on is that they don't go looking for a fight with anyone who is using that feature. And to have like a zero tolerance policy on that is really vital to safeguarding marginalized people within your community.
I know I generally handle it in phases. One is, I like to call it the warning shot, letting the community know we're introducing something new into it, explaining what it is and why, then receiving the feedback. The second part is rebranding it so that it fits more neatly into the community. I know with a particular brand that I was working with, we were introducing safety tools and a bunch of we'll call them old school gamers. We're just like, safety tools. I don't need those safety tools. So I rebranded it as scene directions. And they're like, oh, I like these scene directions. It really helps me GM. I was like, okay, cool, whatever. And then so those first two are the gentle hand. And then the third phase is the firm hand, which is like, this is happening. Get on board and get out. I used to be very live and let live. But with some groups, you give them an inch, they'll take a continent. So I just don't play that anymore with certain things. Pronouns is one of those things. I don't play around with that. You will not have access to certain servers in the Discord if you don't have that tag. I'm sorry, because if I give you the out to say I'm not going to use it, I don't want to even accidentally empower somebody to go, oh, you're using that, screw you. And the thing about community management is there is no right way to do it. there are wrong ways to do it, but there are no right ways to do it. So I don't feel comfortable giving an inch on certain things. Safety tools and pronouns are the two things that I will fight tooth and nail for. So that's I'm done talking.
I do like that both of you mentioned code of conduct, because I was going to ask you, like, if you have a new community manager, a social media manager that sits down and needs to write one of those, what are the first things, like the most important things you would need to include just to make sure no one can forget them?
One really big thing for me, when you're writing your line about your policy on bullying and harassment and discrimination, do not forget to include ableism in there. Disabled identities should also be protected. They are often, like, disabled people are so often the butt of people's jokes in the games industry, specifically in gaming spaces. I think this hits a nerve for me, because I've been in those spaces and I've seen people being called autistic as an insult, and it's not dealt with. So many studios just let that fly, and it cannot fly, because it's consistently perpetuating this idea that not being good at a game or needing to get good is like, oh, you're just autistic. I can't actually fathom it. It doesn't make sense to me. But also, I want people to make sure it's in the player code of conduct, because when I say you need an airtight player code of conduct, you need to be able to say, this is why we have taken this action against you. And if it's not in there, you don't have a solid reason to give them. It shouldn't be an afterthought. It shouldn't be autistic people or disabled people in general have been attacked and now we're going to do something. The erasure around disability in games is just...
As a neurodiverse person, you just sent down a shiver down my spine, because yes, I feel that one. It is a thing.
Another thing is a DevComs policy, which I've had all the studios I've worked at. Basically, it covers every single social media platform, Discord, Twitter, what have you. And I understand that gamers get very passionate. This whole industry is based around passion. But we have a specific structure that once it gets past speaking with passion, which can get rather negative times, but when you start coming after individual people on my team or me in general, we are allowed to take the measures to remove you from the community if you're in it. If you're not, then you're probably gonna end up locked, and I don't want your money anyways. Because if you're treating my dev team as if we're in service to you, that we have to provide this service, we have to provide this product in the way that you see fit, then go play something else. I'm just going to be blunt about it. Go play another game, because we're not going to cater to people who are acting as children. Like, this is just a game. It's not life or death. You don't get to come after my dev team and send death threats or be derogatory or tear them down or harass them, stalk them, whatever. I will see to it that I push the Wendy's mode, which I'm authorized for, and I will rip you apart in turn. I do not care. I am protecting my team, and I'm going to protect the community. Because if you're acting like that towards my dev team, you're going to act like that in my community, and you're just going to drag it down. And I do not have the time or patience for it. Very aggressive about it.
It is very good to know that our vulnerable players can also be the devs. Definitely.
Yeah. Absolutely. Like that comp policy should be there, because if you don't have it in place of, yes, if I'm going to act like a complete monster, you're going to get it in return, and you're not going to be invited back to anything that we do in the future. And that's especially true for streamers as well. Like I have an entire policy I don't like present publicly, but when I go to work with streamers or content creators, I'm going to look at every single VOD you have for the past 2 months and look at your entire Twitter history. If I see one negative thing I don't want tied to the studio, you just lost every single opportunity, and it goes on a blacklist that I carry from studio to studio, and I share with other community managers just to protect the team, the brand, the communities. Like you have to be very, very careful. And granted, you are allowed your opinion, you are allowed your stances, you're allowed all of that, but that does not give you the right to work with us just because of an opinion that we don't agree with. Like that's just how it is. So
I do
very
like that.
strong about it.
It is that thing of like fighting one of us doesn't mean that the others won't know. Right?
Exactly. Like
Community managers are also a community.
It's extremely, extremely small industry. We're all going to find out eventually, and probably within a week.
Yep. And I think it's also the same for streamers, because like the other way around goes as well, right? Chichi, Noir, I think you also did stream on Twitch for a while.
Yeah, yeah. I just to go back really quickly to the terms of service. The one thing that I highly recommend is making sure that everybody has to sign off on it, so that you can pull the receipt. Go when they inevitably go, I didn't know I couldn't do that. There's your name right there. And two, if you are working with a brand, this won't be easy. Probably won't be popular, but making sure that the brand that you're working with also adheres to the same rules as well.
Yep.
I have worked with companies where they're like, make sure that our audience on their P's and Q's, and then I wake up to hear that somebody involved in our company was wilding out on Twitter, and it's just like, no, please no. So like, just make sure everybody's on their P's and Q's on both sides of the fence. That's the way that this has to work. Now, when it comes to streaming, I don't have as much experience, but I do know that I'm very careful about who I stream with, about who I work with. I do have to say that I haven't been as vigilant in my own streaming as I am when I'm working, like when I clock in. But to Cole's point, people very quickly let me know, like, hey, just so you know, that person, and then it's just like, oh God, and then you never talk to them again. You send them to the Shadowlands. So that's.
Yeah, what I was going to say is that I think a lot of people forget that creating a code of conduct, whether that be formally or informally, really begins with the individual person's behavior. Whoever is behind an organization, whoever the streamer is, it really starts with them. If I create a space where I'm very disability forward, BIPOC forward, LGBTQ plus forward, then chances are I'm going to attract people into my community that are also that way, especially if I'm very communicative about that. And so I think that if people spend a little bit more time maybe readily voicing their thoughts and voicing their stance on certain issues, then they're more likely to attract people that are going to, one, fall in line with similar value sets as them, and two, be able to help kind of protect them and cushion them from fallout and things like that, from putting these measures in place, putting these codes of conduct in place to protect other members of the community.
I do like that a lot. Now, speaking of safeguarding, there is another thing that can happen, right? We have unsolicited DMs. We have people reaching out to us. We have drama we get drawn into that we didn't want to get drawn into because we talked to this one person one time on this social media platform. Now, do you have any de-escalation techniques or any other like tricks on how to handle that from your experiences that we can share with the newcomers that are probably listening to this panel?
I'd love to tackle the unsolicited DMs because this has happened to me fairly recently. You can't let people get parasocial with you. It is a dangerous road to go down. And if you're new to making content, or if you're new to community management and you feel like you're not fully aware of where the lines are and you're still trying to figure out what your boundaries are, you can fall into the trappings of being too nice with people and too welcoming, too open, sharing too much of yourself, and you can put yourself in potentially really dangerous situations. Not just physically, but emotionally, your mental health needs to be prioritized. And letting random strangers into your DMs, you don't know who they are, what they're like. Red flags to look out for if they're coming at you with things like, "Can we be friends?" It seems like, in fact, especially if you're an autistic or neurodivergent community manager or content creator, don't misread the things things people say like, "Can we be friends?" Because they're not. It's not just a really friendly hello. There's usually other things going on, and I think it can trick you. I've had to learn from experience of making these mistakes and realizing what people's intentions actually are after the fact, rather than identifying them at the very beginning. Definitely be aware of parasocial relationship imbalances and just protect yourself more than anything else.
All right. Does anyone else want to add to that?
Yeah, I was thinking from more of course, the content creator side. One thing that I've had to learn is I'm a person who has multiple neurodivergencies that make it a little bit difficult for me to communicate, especially when we start getting into things like borderline personality disorder and how personalized I can tend to make things. Just having a team in place that you can communicate with to try and maybe get more insight as to what this person is doing, what they're actually saying, what they could possibly mean behind what they're saying, could be really helpful in both understanding what they're saying and then communicating back to them why what they were saying was inappropriate. And I'm very lucky to have a team, as a stream team manager, to have a team of team leads who really communicate things well with me and tell me like, "No, Chi-Chi, I think you're taking that a little bit more personally than what that person might have intended it to be," and trusting that they have the best interest of the team or the community in mind. And therefore that's why they're telling me this, rather than they want to hurt my feelings or something along those lines.
I love that you're basically writing my transitions for me, because I was going to ask you, well, we can't do everything alone. There is a lot of community managers that are a team of one, and it's a practice that we may or may not agree with. But if you have to pick mods for Twitch, for your Discord, you can't be online 24/7. It's just not possible. How do you choose them? How do you establish rules with those mods? And what do you do in case one of them goes overboard?
I think if you're going to get into content creation or into any sort of community management, you have to understand that part of what this job is conflict. There really is no way to avoid it. I think that being very transparent about that fact is a necessity. So I I lucked into my mods. My my partner's one of my mods, and there's a good friend of mine who's been look. He became a good friend by like being a member of the community. Um, yeah, I don't know how that happened, but I'm very glad that it did. Uh, but you have to have the conversations with them and let them know that these are the rules. This is what I expect from the community, and you're gonna mess up. There's no such thing as doing the job and never messing up. When you mess up, I am going to call you on it. I live my life based on trying to understand the line between ignorance and malice. I'm never going to bring down the hammer on somebody that is ignorant. If I didn't clearly define a rule in a mod went hard on a ruling that I don't necessarily agree on, that's on me. That was a situation in which ignorance led into a certain action. Now, if it's malicious, generally it's very easy to tell when it's malicious, and that's when I bring the hammer in. And I think making sure that you have that talk with your team is just the way to go. I've had that conversation professionally when I was representing a brand. I've had that conversation when it's just me as the streamer. But yeah, that's how I deal with it. It's just being upfront, up first, so that there are no surprises.
Mm.
When I've sent that DM that said, "Hey, we're gonna have a talk about so and so," they'll know, okay, slipped up. And as long as they know they weren't being malicious, it's not going to be a conversation that hurts our friendship. It's just let's go back to the drawing board and reestablish these lines and boundaries.
One thing I do want to point out is that you want to look for people that ask, "How can I help?" rather than "How can I be a moderator?" That's there's a major difference. The implications, like, give me mod rights, make me moderator. I've been here, like if a player comes into my community and says, "Hey, I've played your game 600 hours, make me a moderator." Like, no, I don't really care that you played that way. Great, glad you enjoy it, but I'm going to look for people who are asking, "How can I help? How can I help the community?" All that jazz, or just go out of their way to look for those opportunities by themselves. And then I'm always watching, and then recognizing that help once they do become a moderator status, adding them to the game credits, because if these people are helping as a volunteer basis with the community, they are helping just as much. So I totally advocate for adding moderators, not only for Discord, but Reddit, like any platform the community is on and they're moderating, add them to your credits, because it's such a huge nod to the help that they are giving you for free.
Definitely. Fixing game crediting was a conversation we did derail into earlier. But also, you mentioned another thing that, like, as a streamer, your brand and your moderators are rather close. But as a brand that hires moderators, you do have to put up certain boundaries. Do you want to reiterate what those were?
Basically, don't let people get too familiar as far as game dev and having players be moderators. Let them have their space, let them get frustrated, let them voice their concerns. It's not a slight against you, it's not a slight against the team. They're being the player and giving the genuine feedback, which I actually have a whole structure that we're going to introduce once we open up our community called the council, where it's not moderator status, but it's people not only voted by the community to represent them, but also we're going to handpick our own people. So it's a mixture of who we want to talk to and who the community wants them to present them for the feedback. And we're literally going to sit down between these players and the dev team, not have a curtain, not have a veil. You are literally talking to the dev team, and it can have its ups and downs. There's definitely a risk there, but I think having that really intimate conversation, especially as an indie studio, will not only help with like community loyalty, but it definitely shows that we're going out of our way to make sure you are enjoying the game. But there is a risk with that. Like when I was a streamer, I had people follow me all across convention centers. I had one person sneak into my hotel room just because they wanted an autograph, which that's a huge no-no. And I've been tackled to the floor because someone was super excited to see me. Like, boundaries were crossed. I understand why she was excited, but like, you definitely have to be careful with how friendly you are, because it just takes that one little thing to go over the boundary, and then it just blows the entire relationship. It ruins opportunities for other people in the future, because then your boundaries are going to get even stronger, and it doesn't really help anybody. So it's definitely a balancing act for sure.
I think Noir said something earlier about the fact that community managers can and will mess things up, like we make mistakes. But I think that grace extends to mods as well. And I think it's really important when it comes to building a relationship with moderators where they can take criticism of how they've dealt with something. You've got to have that trust and transparency and that good relationship with them to be able to have a productive conversation. If they've done something not quite right, or they've tried to de-escalate, but in turn they've escalated something, we get training and we have a lot of experience doing this as a career, but we can't apply those same standards to moderators. They're not doing it as a career. They are volunteering, they are helping the dev team, they're helping the studio. And we should be mindful of that, and we should let them have a little bit of grace when it comes to, doing something slightly wrong. And I just wanted to make sure that that we give that to them as well.
And even to those with training, we do have to be nice to ourselves as constant critics during our job, that sometimes we can mess up as well. I do feel like we're getting to the end of the panel, but because you should end everything on a positive note, what was your biggest success in protecting an MVP? Is there anything you want to tell and share with us? Go ahead.
I stopped a major. I stopped a brand from utilizing AI. And in the same meeting, I got them to change. There was a faction of predominantly Asian represented NPCs that had. They were silent warriors, and they had stripes in their hair to designate rank. I got them to change all of that and AI, and I never felt prouder.
That is exactly why we do this job, right? To make sure that people are safe, and this is definitely a big win. I do want to make Cole raise his arm because we did talk about something fun earlier as well.
Yeah. So as much as we talk about the negative, there is a very positive aspect to community management. You're mostly going to see the negative stuff online, but internally, there is a very big sense of community and seeing the joy that comes from players. At last studio, I did one Reddit post, and we were calling our players astronauts to give them a sense of belonging. Within half an hour, they all decided that they wanted to be called space rats. That was the community mascot. That's what they wanted. So I did the initial artwork. My boss, who was the founder, he now works at Respawn, he got the original artwork I made of the space rat tattooed in his arm. My artwork is on my former boss, which is amazing. And then another person who was moonlighting with us from Bungie got a space rat tattoo. And then at our first convention, which was PAX 2021, I also got a space rat tattoo because that's our community mascot. The best part is that we all went to the same tattoo artist in Seattle. All of us saw them. And they also used to work at Bungie, just like my former boss and our QA person. So there's this huge, that was my first game dev job. That was the first community I managed professionally. And just to have the space rat be our mascot, it was such a big thing for all of us. And now I have that tattooed on me as a reminder of this is where you started. And now look where you are. That's a part of me that's never going to go away. And I love it.
I do love it as well. First off, it's a cool tattoo. But second off, it kind of reminds us of why we're doing this. Because games are a big passion. As much as they are our job, they still are a thing that we take dearly.
Yep.
Now, thanks for watching this panel. Thank you, Gayming Live, for having us. It's a really great opportunity to be here and invite you on here, ask you all those questions and learn, and hopefully make some new community managers, some new streamers, some new game masters a little bit less worried, or at least have a toolkit on hand now. And also, thank you, Remag, for sponsoring the session. If you haven't heard, anyone who signs up to Remag and joins the gaming community before October, important, October, is in the chance of winning an Xbox Series X. You just need to scan the code down there and join. And to check out what else is happening across Gayming Live, you need to follow this Twitch channel, follow the Twitch channel called Gaming Mag, and also follow Gaming Mag on all socials. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for having us. And yeah, have a great night or day, whatever time of day you have. Time zones.